I am obsessive compulsive. I think everybody knows that right now, but it's called Pure O or OC. Pure, I think it's called Pure O. Google it. It's obsessive compulsive disorder with insight. And so you know that you're crazy type thing. You know that when you're having obsessive thoughts, you know that when you're having intrusive thoughts, you know that when you step into the elevator, chances are it's not going to shift and split you in half and kill you instantaneously, although it does happen more often than you could possibly understand. So I'm aware of these things. It also comes with a little bit of superstition, anxiety, all the other great stuff. For the last couple of weeks now, I think it's actually being referred to as the 12-day war. Everything out of the Middle East of the wars have to have a name that refers to the duration of it. You have the 6-day war, the 7-day war, the 12-day war. It's being referred to as the 12-day war. And I'm not saying this as a casting shade. It's being called the 12-day war while some people don't refer to it as a war. It's being referred to as not war, but coordinated military strikes, all of which might be distinctions without a difference, to the extent that what the concern is for what's going on in the Middle East right now is, again, U.S. involvement, again in foreign wars, again in the Middle East. And then the question is always, are we doing it based on accurate intel, or are we doing it based on flawed intel, which we think is the best intel and totally accurate, as typically is the case? And for the last 2 weeks, it was initiated with strikes by Israel against Iran, because the determination had been that Iran is now weeks away from a nuclear-capable weapon. I hear everybody out there saying the same thing, screaming at their computer. Iran has been 2 weeks away for 20 years. I appreciate all arguments on all sides here. Some people would say they've been close for a long time and they keep getting pushed back, whether or not it's by military intervention or by Stuxnet that they did a while back. Bottom line, agree or disagree with it, the argument goes to the effect that they are now closer than they've ever been, and it's necessary to pound them militarily. Israel goes in with strikes. Trump puts out some truth posts the day of, indicating that, creating some confusion as to whether or not it was known, it was planned, whether or not Israel went in a little bit early, whether or not there was a strategy that Trump had in place that was foiled by premature escalation by Netanyahu and Israel. And then you have Operation Midnight Hammer, which was the U.S. military flying in with B-2 bombers, destroying purportedly, or at least severely damaging, 3 nuclear facilities, which were in the middle of the desert, hidden in bunkers, and the ensuing concerns that resulted from, yet again, more escalation in the Middle East and apparent more involvement, either by hook, crook, or necessity, of America in this war between Israel and Iran. Okay. Yesterday, after people are complaining, oh no, we are back in yet another Middle Eastern conflict, people saying, no, it's not war, it's just targeted military strikes, much like when Trump took out Soleimani back in 2020. And then you have the announcement of a ceasefire deal. And what's interesting in all of this, it's a little dismaying, but I should probably, you can't write off everybody's opinion on the internet as though they're bots. You can't write off everybody's opinion on the internet as though they're trolls. And what is interesting in all of this is the division that this seems to be creating among the right. Division is not necessarily the same thing as disagreement. Disagreement is healthy, and it's a sign that you're not in a cult when people who subscribe to the same political ideologies or the same political party disagree with one another. That's how you have healthy debate and progression of ideas within the party. Where disagreement becomes division is where you have outright demonization of either side who agree to disagree or don't agree to disagree. And you had the likes of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, who else? Jack Posobiec, Owen Schroyer, some people, populist voices being anti-war, seemingly getting, I say, defamed or attacked by those on the right who are calling them purveyors of disinformation and or shills and or whatever. And then you have the people who seem to be gung-ho at all costs, go in and nuke, annihilate Iran. And it's been, I'm not trying to thread the needle in terms of fence sitting. From the beginning, for whatever my my opinion is worth anything, on the fence. I think most people, although not most people, some people do think Iran should be entitled to have a nuclear weapon. It would be the ultimate deterrent. And the arguments for that, I think, are more along the lines of no country should have a nuclear weapon, not that Iran should acquire a nuclear weapon. And then their retort is, well, if some countries who shouldn't have a nuclear weapon, all countries who shouldn't have a nuclear weapon should have a nuclear weapon. And that, I just think, is, okay, stupid reasoning, period. Others say Iran is hell-bent on annihilation of the state of Israel, genocidal, suicidal, homicidal, irrational, terrorist state, and they can never have a nuclear weapon. Others would then say, for a state that is anti-Semitic, genocidal, terroristic, suicidal, homicidal, whatever, they've got the biggest population of Jews living in their country outside of Israel in the Middle East. And then the argument to that, the response is, well, they're not so much anti-Semitic as they are anti-state of Israel. And if they ever were to acquire a nuclear weapon, they would immediately use it against Israel. You have yesterday Trump coming out and announcing a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Patrick Bet David, whose tweet I don't have on the subject, I think was the most on point in that if the ceasefire lasts, Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, period, full stop. If all of the strategizing, the pinpoint, what was it? Military strike, there was a word for it. The pinpoint coordinated military strike actually results in a ceasefire and, I don't know, resumption of the Abraham Accords discussions and negotiations, Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Whether or not that prize would be worth anything given the other abject failures and horrible people who have won it, Trump might say, thank you, I'll give the $1 million to somebody, a nice charity, and you can take your Nobel Peace Prize back. It's not worth the whatever it's made with. And yesterday, after the ceasefire was announced, you had people taking victory laps on the internet. And it's everyone's looking for the gotcha on Twitter. The people who were criticizing or concerned about the escalation, well, now they get to have their faces rubbed in it because there's a ceasefire. And being OCD and totally superstitious, and having lived through this now at least 2 or 3 other times, to get prematurely excited about a ceasefire in the Middle East is the embodiment of counting your chickens before they're hatched. I am so superstitious. Like when people say they're pregnant, it's like, okay, well, how pregnant are you? 2 months? Like, okay, just wait until you're showing before you say it. I think it's like 1 in 4 pregnancies doesn't end in delivering a baby. And I'm so superstitious. You tell people that you're pregnant, and everyone's like, you're posting the pictures, and then something happens, and then it's devastation. Peace in the Middle East is much like that, except ceasefires in the Middle East. More often than not, if not every single time, there are violations of the ceasefires, escalation, de-escalation, whatever. Every side blames the other side for having violated the ceasefire. Okay, the announcement comes out. People start taking a victory lap. It's nice to be optimistic, and it's nice to cross your fingers and pray to God that Trump can actually pull this off. And then before the ink even dries on the ceasefire that had been announced for the future, both sides are violating the ceasefire and both sides are blaming the other party for the ceasefire, which brings us to the video that went viral this morning. And one can ask some questions after having seen this video. Where is it? Here, C-SPAN, I think it's this. This is the one. This is the one, people. And if you're sensitive to F-bombs, children, cover your ears, earmuffs. This is Trump this morning talking about the ceasefire, the apparent mutual bilateral violation of the ceasefire that hadn't even come into effect before both parties are violating it, and Trump visibly frustrated about this. Are you concerned that Iran violated the ceasefire agreement from the journalist?
Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have 2 countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Do you have to respond to Iran?
I will tell you this without reservation and without hesitation and without the slightest feeling of guilt. You can call me biased for the rest of your days. I love Donald Trump as a politician. I met him once. I didn't even meet him. I don't think he doesn't know who the hell I am. When I introduced him at that evening of lawfare, John Eastman and others at Mar-a-Lago. And as I'm up there doing this panel about with victims of lawfare, I see Donald John Trump in the back of the room. And we were actually talking to John Eastman about his role as an attorney for Donald Trump, for which he was receiving all sorts of lawfare attempts to disbar, arrest, and whatever. And I got to introduce Donald John Trump to the crowd, and it was amazing. In as much as you can love a personality that you've never met in real life, and as much as you can know about someone that you've never met in any meaningful sense in real life, through the words of others, through the people who know him best, I love Donald Trump. He is the president for our time. And I can hear the people out there saying, if you love him, then you have to respect everything that he does and no questions. No, 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 and no. That being said, to come out and say they've been fighting for so long, neither of them know what the fuck they're even doing to journalists. It's not for the journalists that he's saying that. It's for the implicated parties. Some people are going to say Iran knows exactly what it's doing. It wants to annihilate the state of Israel. Some people are going to say Israel knows exactly what it's doing. It wants regime change in Iran. At which point, someone's going to have to say, if Israel wants regime change in Iran, and Iran wants to annihilate Israel off the face of the map, there can be no ceasefire. So either the expectations of what both parties want is actually not accurate, in which case you don't have a ceasefire, or it is, in which case you don't have a ceasefire. The bottom line, they've been fighting for so long, neither of them know what the F they even want. But when Trump gets out there and says, I'm not happy with either of them. When we announce a ceasefire, that's the ceasefire, by the way, as of last night, I think it was a 6-hour time frame or a 12-hour time frame within which the ceasefire was going to take effect. And I guess it's because some planes were already in mid-operation and it takes some time to call them back. When someone calls a ceasefire, announces apparently a bilateral mutual ceasefire, and then one party says, well, I'm going to take this window of opportunity to bomb the shit out of your country. I mean, it's like saying, tomorrow I'm going to go on a year of celibacy, so tonight I'm going to go to Vegas and have sex with as many hookers as possible. It's like saying tomorrow I'm going to check myself into rehab, tonight I'm going on a bender. It's not how it works. It's not to the spirit of the ceasefire. And when Trump gets out there and says, yeah, we announced a ceasefire, and then apparently Bibi, who, if he's hell-bent on regime change, a ceasefire is not going to satisfy any of his desires, says, okay, well, ceasefire in 6 hours, until then, let's go bomb the living bejesus out of Iran. Then Iran's like, we're not going to sit here and get pummeled for the next 6 hours. Okay, doesn't matter. That's what happened. Trump comes out and says, we have a ceasefire. We need to get to that time frame within which this is going to be implemented. And then the question is going to be, where does it go after this? That's where we are right now. I don't know if everybody watched Steven Crowder today. Steven Crowder it's a very interesting show. And so important, by the way, he made the announcement at the beginning that he broadcast the first 15 or 20 minutes on CommieTube as well. He had an interesting show talking about addressing misinformation and disinformation in the context of this internal divide within the right. And he went on to address some bombastic, hyperbolic, inflammatory tweets from Candace Owens, Stu Peters, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson. I think there was one more whose name I'm forgetting. And as I'm watching it, I'm listening, and I'm hopefully I'm going to get to do an interview with Steven Crowder before the end of the week, and it'll be fantastic if we can do it. Everybody's very busy and timing is hectic. When Crowder was going over some of the arguments, some of the disinformation, misinformation that you see online, and it makes for the discourse online to be impossible. You can't fence it. If you defend Israel, you're a Zionist shill, a Zionist pig. If you are mere questioning of the intervention, you become a terrorist sympathizer and you become a anti-MAGA. And I had a bit of a back and forth with Roseanne Barr, oddly enough, on Twitter. Another person who, and as much as I think I can like someone who I've never met, I think I like Roseanne Barr, where people say, look, you cannot question Trump's judgment. If you like him, if you love him, if you think he's the president of our time, you have to be absolutely deferential to his judgment. I don't know if it's here or always, but it's certainly not always, because I happen to think that the reason why I love Donald Trump as a politician and as the president of our time is because he does listen to the feedback, not of the, I'm not even going to use the word clickbait. He listens to the feedback of the people. And we now know this because J.D. Vance, as we now know, it's been stated publicly elsewhere, was in communication with Richard Barris about the sentiment of the people who put Trump into office as relates to the prospect for another potential conflict in the Middle East. But Crowder on his show is talking about the arguments, like the disinformation that America is Israel's bitch, is to put it crassly. America does Israel's bidding. Israel controls America. And Stephen Crowder's point was that this sound clip from Trump's entire MO here, is clearly illustrative of the fact that Israel doesn't control the US. I put out the question earlier in terms of how this all got started. How did this all get started? When Bibi goes and bombs Iran, the question is this: were Trump and Netanyahu working together in concert, organizing, orchestrating, and in full knowledge of what was going to happen as relates to those strikes? Did Netanyahu prematurely strike, knowing that it would somehow inevitably suck Trump into this conflict, if only temporarily through precision pinpoint military strikes? Did he do it prematurely? Apparently many think that because Trump hadn't yet successfully evacuated the area, and it came a little bit earlier than what Trump might have wanted, ostensibly based on some public statements he was going to make the week after. Does Bibi do it knowing that it's going to drag Trump and America into this, sort of deceitfully, sort of backhandedly? The other question is America using Israel to do its dirty work and fight Iran? There are three, and then there's fourth, everyone has their variations of the questions. So as relates to how this all gets going, is Netanyahu acting prematurely and without authorization of Trump, and then sort of doing it knowing that it's going to drag Trump into this conflict, if only temporarily? Is Trump using Bibi to fight a proxy war against Iran, knowing that America doesn't necessarily have the public support for an outright war with Iran, so they can use Israel to do it? Or is it a little bit of both, doing it in concert, in tandem, for their own respective positions? Okay, I, full disclosure, happen to think that Bibi was potentially backhanded in the premature strikes on Iran, which ultimately drew America into Operation Midnight Hammer. And I think what we might be seeing is a little bit of the frustration coming out as relates to Trump. Okay, so as relates to Israel being the master of America, I don't subscribe to it. I don't adhere to that philosophy. I understand the argument of those who are making it. I think it's by and large cherry picking to come to that conclusion. But the flip side is, and this is one which I hope to discuss with Crowder, the theory that many people ascribe to is that, I'm saying this purely analytically without espousing it, that Israel, the argument goes, is to the extent they might be trying to drag America into a conflict, the question is then, to what degree is Israel an ally or using America's might to carry out its own bidding in the US? That is the argument that I think people need to address without writing it off as anti-Semitism or racist, bigoted philosophies. It's a legit question. And every country should be acting in its own best interest. And to the extent that Israel thinks it is in its own best interest to potentially exploit that relationship, it's a fair question to ask. But the bottom line is, we're going to see where this ceasefire goes, because you've lived through this once, you've lived through this a number of times. The ceasefires simply do not last. And then it's just the same old game of each party blaming the other for having violated the ceasefire. And based on what Trump said today, I wonder what happens to both Israel and Iran if Trump simply says, all right, we tried to help. We did what we think we needed to do to neutralize the nuclear threat posed by Iran. You two big boys can't figure it out through a ceasefire. Go have at each other. And we'll see who is more unhappy with that relationship if Trump decides to do that. Now, let me see what I was going to do with this. Why would this even be here? This is not the tweet that I wanted to bring up. I don't think I've missed anything. Have there been any later breaking developments on what's been going on there? The Remanded says, so happy to hear the ostriches continue get help. On another BC related issue, I have a give, send, go to bring a lawsuit to elections. British Columbia officials search BC election lawsuit, confirmed violations. Everyone who has not been following the Remanded on Twitter, follow the Remanded. It's Canadian stuff, might be more or less interesting for what you're interested in if you're American, but the Remanded does amazing work. The Twitter handle is The Remanded. And let me just share the tweet and the handle with everybody so you can check it out, because he's been following the British Columbia election case, and there was some chicanery going on there. Link. Okay, that was that. And then there was also Rodiodo says, Viva, watch the speech from the Crown Prince of Iran. I believe the people of Iran will rise up and kick the current regime out. God is in control and Trump is in his hands. That's the other. So I got into a back and forth with this with a couple of people. Roseanne also were like, I say, like, are we not allowed voicing our respectful disagreement with Trump? One of the biggest issues I had during the election cycle, and it was, again, when you are behind the politician, your criticism is not intended to tear them down. It's intended to make them the better candidate and to resolve or address some of the concerns that, as someone who speaks to a mildly large audience daily, you know that people have. When Trump gets up there and touts the beautiful effectiveness of that vaccine, and I'm putting that in quotes in my own head, but I'll put it with my fingers, and when he praises Johnson & Johnson, and you have people booing him at, I think it was a ball game, you got to make sure Trump hears that people are pissed off with that so-called vaccine. They want Fauci prosecuted. They want Pfizer prosecuted. They want Johnson & Johnson prosecuted. They don't want to hear, when they've been vaccine injured or they know someone has been vaccine injured, the president still touting the success of Operation Warp Speed. And admittedly, Operation Warp Speed was intended to find a vaccine that prevented the contraction of the virus while leaving open alternative remedies and without mandating that jab to everybody. Operation Warp Speed was hijacked, it was abused, and Trump was lied to by Pfizer and by Fauci. And that's the way the people view it. And for him to get out there and say, big, beautiful, great vaccine, greatest invention ever, it's tone deaf, and you don't try to bring that to his awareness to tear him down, and you don't not bring that to his attention because you think he's infallible. When it comes to this, we'll see it. I believe that Trump has heard the concerns of the American people. I think now he's seen a bit of the potential underhandedness. I mean, everybody expects underhandedness from Iran, but he's now potentially experiencing yet again the nature of the conflict in the Middle East. Not to say it goes on forever, but it goes on until it ends. And the question is, does it end with American involvement, boots on the ground, another 20-plus year war that yields absolutely nothing, that may or may not have been predicated on inaccurate or exaggerated information at the time? We shall see.